Hello everybody, my name is Megan Hutchison, and in this video I will be showing you how I made my steampunk monogoggle for my vampire hunter build. Let's get started. I was very inspired by some of Lost Wax's video tutorials, and I've included a link to the relevant ones in the description below. I'm going to be doing something very similar, but for this I made my own pattern. So the first step I did was basically to tape pieces of paper to my face until I found a shape that I liked. Then I made a definitive pattern out of those pieces of paper and cut it out of craft foam. I made sure to note the alignment points on various parts of the pattern. Then I began to use my hot glue gun to glue the points together. I glued the cylinder closed at its seam. Then I glued the top piece to the bottom piece at the nose bridge, and again on the overlap at the cheek area. Then I went back and glued the cylinder to the nose piece and the bridge, and tacking it in those places and at the top and bottom before hot gluing all the way around the cylinder, just to get that really strong bond. And that's the basic part of the monogoggle done. However, I wanted to add a little bit of flair to it. I wanted to have a top section that was sort of hovering over the bottom section, almost looking like a camera lens or an aperture. So I put a strip of foam along the outside of the cylinder, right at the top, and made a new piece of foam that was the shape of the aperture that I wanted to use. I glued that one over top of the strip of foam at the top of the cylinder so that it would look like it was sort of floating above the other one. Then I glued some shapes onto the sides of the cylinder to make it look a little bit more interesting. The next step was to figure out a way to put an actual lens in this. We got some cheap goggles from a costume store and just popped out the lenses, but you could also use old glasses or glasses from the thrift store or the dollar store, whatever you've got handy. I knew that I wanted my lens cover to have 2 layers on it, so I traced the inside of my cylinder because I wanted to make sure that the circle that actually held the lens would fit inside of it. Then I traced the outside of the cylinder and made a ring to go on top of the cylinder that would hold the inside ring, which would hold the lens. Kind of confusing, but you'll see what the final result looks like. Because these pieces and the joins that hold them together are so small, I used crazy glue this time, or super glue I think it was, instead of hot glue to hold them together, and this worked really, really well. And here's what that front ring looks like attached to the front of the cylinder. You can see that I have also added a couple of other things, some screw heads on the side as well as some punched out rivets on the front, and a neat little doodad. Let's go with that. Neat little doodad up at the top, and run some chains from it to the underside of the cylinder just for visual interest. Now we have to go and attach the strap. There are many different ways you can go about attaching a strap to your goggles. You can use a pre-made strap from a set of goggles if you wish, an elastic one or a fabric one. You can use ribbon depending on how light they are. I had this fantastic brassy looking belt that I got from Value Village, and I wanted to use that one. So I measured the belt around my head and cut off the parts that were unnecessary, making sure that the remainder would still go around the back of my head and be able to do up in the back. The next step was to attach the belt to the monogoggle on the sides, at the cheek and at the forehead. For this, I wanted to get a really strong hold, so I decided to use some rubber cement. For rubber cement, you brush it onto the places that you want your pieces to touch, and then you leave them for 15 minutes until it's basically barely tacky to the touch. And once these things stick together, they are stuck together, so you gotta make sure that you've got everything aligned before you glue them together. There, that looks pretty secure, but it also looks kind of ugly. So I took a couple of spare pieces of craft foam, and using my hot glue gun, I put them on top of it like metal brackets on either side. This does double duty of providing more visual interest as well as hiding the slightly uglier ends of the belt. The next step is to give the monogoggle a paint job. The first coat will be a couple of coats of nice dark black paint, so we have a good strong base to work with and all those oranges and weird foam colors are hidden. The next step is going to be to paint everything that's going to be brassy a brown shade. This will give the gold rub and buff that we're going to put on it a warmer tone in the background. I'm going to be using a gold color. Mine is technically from Craft Smart, and I'm just using a rubber glove for safety and ease of cleanup, and I'm going to be applying it with my finger to all of the brown areas that are going to be brass. You want to apply a really light coat because when you lay this stuff on thick, it gets really opaque and gold, which is nice when you're trying to get a uniform color appearance, but for something that you want to look more antique like this, just go with the side of your finger or the side of your brush, whatever you're using, and then go back once you've got a little bit of wax on and rub it in and blend it out with a non-waxy finger. For a couple of details, as well as for the metal covers over the straps, I used a silver color of metallic wax paste, and I used a stiff bristled brush to apply it. As a finishing touch, I'm just going to add a couple more doodads to the already existing doodads to make it look a little bit more ornate. I'm adding some beads that I had from a previous craft project strung up on a piece of thin wire up on the battery pack transmitter thingamajig up on top. I used a needle to poke holes in the foam on either side where the wire is going to go in. Then I put a dab of super glue onto those holes and pressed the wire in, holding it until it was secure. Now, this wouldn't be a steampunk build without some gears. I don't usually subscribe to the glue some gears on it to call it steampunk look, but they do add a nice mechanical touch to projects like this where it fits. I'm going to be using some pre-made gears that I got at a costume store and just gluing them on with a little bit of super glue. And this is what the finished product looks like. The final step is to take that lens that we were looking at earlier and glue it into the housing. Make sure to brush it relatively clean of fingerprints first. Then I'm going to be using some super glue on the inside of the housing to attach the lens. I apologize that you can't see much through the cylinder. I apply super glue onto the inside ring and then press the lens down on top. Be careful not to use too much super glue if you're trying this, because if it leaks out onto the edges of the lens as it did with mine, it can create sort of a powdery, cloudy appearance. I was totally fine with it, but you might not want to. And there we have it, it's finally done. I'm so happy with the final result of this project, and I'm looking forward to showing it off on Halloween. Thanks everybody for watching. I'll see you next time.